Cineplex HD and Kantipur, welcome to Kantipur Conclave, Beyond Expectations, Beyond Boundaries. I am Sadiksha Shrestha, and I'm absolutely delighted to be hosting this conclave that has brought together thought leaders from across various fields to envision challenges into opportunities and understand what happened in the past, what is happening in the present, and what may happen in the future. Acknowledging our chief guest for the event, Right Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Sher Deuba, and taking his permission along with our chair, we would now like to begin this session. And for the welcome remarks, may I please invite on stage the Chairman and Managing Director of Kantipur Media Group, Mr. Kailash Sirohiya.
Thank you, Sadiksha. Good morning, everyone. Right. The keynote speakers of Kantipur Conclave, India's former National Security Advisor, Mr. Shivshankar Menon, and Nepal's former Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Bhoj Pokharel. The experts from the various fields who will be taking part in this various session of the two-day Kantipur Conclave. All those taking part as guests and all those watching us live on Kantipur TV and Kantipur. I would like to greet and welcome you all on behalf of the Kantipur Media Group. This is the third session of the Kantipur Conclave. Kantipur Media Group has been holding various kinds of summits and conferences centered on important national issues. In this conclave, we'll also be discussing regional and international issues. This is why this conference is both unique and important. We believe that there should be public debate on matters of mutual interest. It is with the belief that we are organizing this conclave. The success of the two previous editions of the conclave in 2019 and 2020 has also motivated us to take the initiative to give continuity to this program. The third edition of Kantipur Conclave had to be pushed back a little due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, COVID caused havoc right around the world. There is a big difference between the pre- and post-COVID worlds. COVID has brought about the biggest shift in the global politics, economic system, and balance of power after the end of the Second World War. The Ukraine war that started even before the world could overcome COVID has further hurt the global economy. Many countries are witnessing economic slowdown and people are suffering. Nepal is not immune to this trend. As well, climate change has emerged as another menace before us. The previous COP meeting in Glasgow, nearly 200 countries expressed their collective commitment through the Glasgow Climate Pact. Yet its implementation has been very weak. Humanity cannot run away from the multidimensional crisis that has resulted from the pandemic, war, and climate crisis. There is a collective challenge before us to move ahead by tackling these urgent issues. Some of these vital issues will be also surely be raised in the many sessions of this conclave, we believe. Even in the 3 decades since the establishment of Kantipur Media Group, Nepal has witnessed many groundbreaking events. The decade-long Maoist conflict, active monarchy, the 2006 People's Movement, the Madhesi Movement, establishment of republic, the 2 elections to the Constituent Assembly, and the promulgation of the new constitution are some of the major events in Nepal's recent history. All this happened for the country's prosperity and development. But the Nepalese people have not been able to see this prosperity and development. Lack of political accountability is mainly responsible for this, beside other situation-specific causes. Nepal, which has long witnessed government instability, has been hit by one after another political and social upheavals. But the recently held local elections have suggested new beginning. They reflect the new aspiration of the new generation. Nepal is on the verge of its second federal and provincial elections since the establishment of the new constitutional order. This is a wonderful opportunity to strengthen Nepal's democratic process and in the state of prolonged instability. In this context, that's the third edition of the Kantipur Conclave is being organized. It will not only help us understand the current problem and find ways to overcome them, the event will also bring into public debate the various examples of constructive initiatives and motivators that we have witnessed in the time being. The central theme of this year's Kantipur Conclave is beyond expectations, beyond boundaries. This also respects the human desire not to be confined with the set boundaries. The main goal of the Kantipur Media Group's annual Kantipur Conclave is to get experts from in and outside the country to intensively discuss the country's economy and social progress and transformations, and to find out more constructive way forward. This is why in the 2 days of the program, we will discuss political, geopolitics, economy, energy, climate change, gender equality, digital transformation, soft power, political dialogue, music, and various other issues. Addressing the 12th session of the conclave will be 52 different speakers who are going to have the discourse. I believe this program will help connect Nepal and Nepalese with the rest of the world and engage in deep discussion on issues of current and future interest. Behind the success of each of our program are our readers, viewers, listeners, and sponsors. I'd like to express my special thanks to them. In the end, once again, I would like to welcome and express my gratitude to the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba, and all the others who have made time to take part in this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sirohiya, for your zealful welcome remarks. And yes, what a wonderful theme this year, beyond boundaries, beyond expectations. It is now with great honor that I request our chief guest, Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba, for his opening remarks in this August gathering.
Chairman of Kantipur Media Group, Kailash ji, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Namaste and good morning. I am pleased to join you all here in this third edition of Kantipur Conclave. Thank you very much for inviting me. Kantipur Media Group is a steadfast supporter of the democratic values that we all fought for. It has been a staunch defender of people's right to know and a fearless critic of the government, including myself. As a Prime Minister who have often been on the receiving end of your critics, I would like to say that while you may not have always been correct, you have been a key partner in a democratic process in this country. I take this opportunity to commend you for all your contribution and wish all you success in the days ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the world today faces unprecedented challenges, geopolitical tensions, rising inequalities, economic distress, and climate crisis, among others, continue to pose threat to the global peace and prosperity. COVID-19 pandemic has further exposed the structural vulnerability of all countries, big and small, developed and developing. Nepal is not an exception to this. The current cascading crisis, mostly not of our own making, have been hindering our efforts to climate and development ladders. However, we are aware of our challenges. Our topmost priority to ensure is resilient recovery from the pandemic. This means accelerated action in economic recovery, expansion of the social protection system, and investment in people. I am pleased to inform you that as today, 94% of our target population has been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, with 96% receiving at least one dose. The government is committed to double its efforts to ensure sustainable recovery and remain better prepared for future crises of this nature. Secondly, the surge of demand, the surge of demand of consumer goods, increased inflation, and the pressure on foreign exchanges result with some formidable challenges for this. The crisis in Ukraine added further woes to the worries, but we have been able to tackle these problems with sensible monetary and fiscal policies. These have started to turn around the world, around the last few months, with increasing flow of remittances and tourist arrival, decreasing petroleum prices. We expect economic situation to improve in these days ahead. Having said this, it will be equally crucial to continue investing in the sectors vital to reduce poverty, create jobs, ensure food security and quality education. We need to do more to modernize infrastructure, transportation network, and take concerned efforts to reduce trade deficit. Thirdly, Nepal is one of the hotspots to climate crisis. Our people have been bearing this appropriate burden of the climate change. This appropriate burden of climate change with increased frequency of landslide, flood, and wildfire. According to one estimate, our average annual material loss due to flood alone is 140 million US dollars. To combat climate change and ensure that local vulnerability are properly addressed, we have implemented local adaptation plan. I believe that they are more than just periodic elections. They are the testament of our ability to ensure the peaceful transfer of power. We ultimately strengthen the rule of law, enhance people's faith in democratic process. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the theme of this year's Kantipur Conclave, Beyond Expectations, Beyond Boundaries, resonate very well what we need to do to fulfill people's aspiration. We must realize our potential to move beyond boundaries and work collectively to reshape our future. The role of partners, including the media sector, will be very much critical in this regard. I wish this edition of Kantipur Conclave all success. Thank you very much. यार बत्ती नआउँदो रहेछ के गर्नु पर्छ अहिले सजाय दिनु खोजे जस्तो छ तैँले
Our gratitude towards Right Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Sher Deuba, for his opening remarks and for accepting our invitation in being a part of Kantipur Conclave 2022. We would now like to invite our keynote speakers for this opening session of Kantipur Conclave. Firstly, we'd like to invite Professor Shivshankar Menon on stage for his keynote address. He's currently the visiting professor at Ashoka University, India, and chair of the Ashoka Center for China Studies. He has also published Choices Inside the Making of Indian Foreign Policy in 2016 and India and Asian Geopolitics, the Past, Present in April 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, please do join me in welcoming with a big, big round of applause, Professor Menon on stage.
Right Honorable Prime Minister Sher Deuba, Mr. Kailash, Sirohiya, Mr. Bhoj, Pokharel, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for asking me and for doing me the honor of speaking here at the Kantipur Conclave in such distinguished company. This is really a remarkable occasion that you have built here. And the level of participation, I think, is proof of its value and its influence. I thought I would use this opportunity to speak about the moment in which we in South Asia as a whole find ourselves. Because to me, this seems paradoxical. Many of our countries are in economic crisis or difficulty, and we face political uncertainty. And yet, to my mind, we have a moment of geopolitical and economic opportunity. Let me try and expand on this. Many describe our present condition as a crisis. In the last year and a half, 5 governments in South Asia have changed, not all of them in an orderly or predictable or expected way. 3 of our countries are in advanced stages of talks with the IMF and the international community on how to deal with their debt crises, and others might have to follow. And our economies are reeling from what the Honorable Prime Minister just mentioned, from the global economic slowdown, from the real prospect of a recession in some of the advanced countries, and from the effects from the fall in our tourism, remittance, other earnings thanks to the pandemic, and now by the second-order effects of the war in Ukraine. Now, this is not unique to South Asia. We are not alone in our economic troubles. The IMF says that something like 53 countries around the world, developing countries, face the possibility of extreme debt stress. But what makes this truly worrying, to my mind, is the fact that we have seen this coming for years. Some of us have been warning about it, and we've done precious little about it when you look at the international community as a whole. When you look at the big challenges, this developing country, debt crisis, climate change, other pandemic, other transnational or international challenges, I think, frankly, based on the recent experience, we should have low or no expectations of the international order. We can't look to the world for answers or solutions to our present crisis. So if this is how I see the situation, how can I say that we may have a moment of geopolitical and economic opportunity? Let's begin with the geopolitics. Today, South Asia is at the center of global geopolitics, and that creates an opportunity for us if we are bold enough to take it. The world is now in a transition from a US or Western-led post-World War II order to something that we can only dimly discern through a glass darkly, as it were, and the nature of which is still to be determined. I call this a world between orders, a world adrift. And whether it's globalization or the world economy, global politics, they're all in trouble and are changing. And the signs are all around us in the return of great power rivalry, in the rise of China and in the US-China strategic contention. It has engendered in the hotspots, which are all alive again, from the Senkakus through Taiwan, South China Sea, India-China border, to all the way to Yemen, Ukraine. Notice that these hotspots surround us in South Asia. And, as I mentioned, the inability of the international community to respond to these challenges in any meaningful way. So, as a result, global geopolitics are more fraught than they've ever been for a long time. And we, therefore, have to deal with contention. You know this in Nepal. You are being courted to be part of both the BRI and the free and open Indo-Pacific. And you know what great power rivalry is happening. But the reaction across the world, say to Western sanctions against Russia after the Ukraine war, suggests that most countries seek an alternative. They don't want to have to choose sides in this geopolitical rivalry of the great powers. They want to find a third way, a way which actually addresses the problems that they face. And they don't want to be caught up in other people's quarrels. So we in South Asia are not alone in this either. But one unfortunate effect of this great power rivalry and of this fraught international politics has been to make the international organizations weaker and more ineffective than they have been ever since World War II. We saw this during the pandemic, when, frankly, the international response was pathetic, with powers trying to score debating points, gain political advantage, rather than dealing with the humanitarian crisis that we all faced. But we shouldn't be surprised, because after all, these are organizations which are composed of member states. If those member states are quarreling, they're not going to make these organizations effective or let them do their job. So what The other change that has really brought South Asia to the center stage is the fact that both the economic and the political center of gravity of the world is now in Asia. Asia is central, whether as a locus of production of the globe's goods, or whether as the place where the global balance of power is being determined. And South Asia is beside the most dynamic economies in the world and the major flashpoints and the hotspots of global politics. So this centrality is unusual for us, at least in the recent past. We're not used to this. During the Cold War, the main geopolitical fault line was in Europe, the Fulda Gap, between the Soviet Union and the US. And quite frankly, that suited many of us. We were quite happy to go our own way, unbothered by the world. But the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, globalization processes, they changed all that. Our economies, India's economy certainly, and to a lesser or greater extent each of the other South Asian economies, are now integrated into the world economy. Which brings me to the economic opportunity. That integration brings both our problems and opportunities. The figures show that South Asia did very well in the globalization decades. Those of us who use the opportunity and embrace that integration, like Bangladesh, did best, actually, improving their economic condition and the welfare of their people. Both our present economic crisis and our geopolitical opportunity are proof that South Asia is now an integral part of the globalized world. And to my mind, that cannot be unraveled. You can't turn your back on the world or say that, oh, I can solve my problems by going back to an earlier time. That's not an option. Instead, the solutions to our problems can be found in changing how we deal with that world, how we deal with each other in South Asia, and in our internal political and economic management. So what might we do? Let me tell you what I think. I mean, this is a list in no particular order, and I'd be very happy if some of you would, well, criticize it, change it, add to it, whatever you like. But the list is made with the consciousness that because globalization, the world economy, global politics are in trouble, many of the solutions that we have to seek have to be among ourselves, in South Asia itself. That we cannot today rely on the world to solve some of these problems that we have, and that we need to concentrate on doing. So my list, what does it include? Firstly, obviously, that we need to do much more to integrate our own economies, our own region economically. And there are simple steps that some of us have been taking in the last 10 years or so, improving connectivity, road, rail, pipelines, power, and that seems to be the key. Our experience seems to show that. Another step that I think we might consider in today's world, given what we've seen happening, is to make creative changes to payment systems. In the Sri Lankan case, when Sri Lanka defaulted in April on her debt, it was countries in South Asia that came to her assistance. She's still negotiating with the IMF and the rest of the world. She has a staff-level agreement now with the IMF. But India, for instance, made available about $3.8 billion worth of food, fuel, and credits to see Sri Lanka through. Other big creditors and so on are still discussing the terms and the nature of their help to an economy which frankly was in free fall. And so I think the lesson is that external powers have their own priorities and cannot be relied upon the way they might have been maybe 10 years ago or so. Nor can we rely to that extent on the international organizations. The reason we are one of the least integrated and one of the poorest sub-regions in the world is partly because we haven't built the supply and value chains that would use the comparative advantage that we have within South Asia among our own countries. Most of the world's manufacturing actually today takes place in 3 clusters, centered on the US, on Germany, and on China. Until 2007, it used to be Japan. And if you look at it, trade of intermediate inputs within these networks actually explains more than half of global trade. The cross-border trade of finished goods and services accounts for only 1/3 of global trade. Energy and metals and commodities make up the rest. So what we really need to do is to use the advantages that we have, the comparative advantages that our own economies have, and link and do exactly what our theme says, work beyond boundaries, and think of South Asia as a whole, rather than concentrating on making sure that we can do everything ourselves and trying to export finished goods and products and services. The other opportunity, of course, is in energy, where South Asia has long been an importer, yet as we move to a greener, more sustainable energy future, and as energy technology and therefore energy economics changes, it's being revolutionized around us, we now have an opportunity. Nepal, I think, has shown us the way. If you look at what Nepal has done in electricity, it's really a remarkable turnaround. And Nepal could be the supplier of hydroelectric energy to the rest of South Asia. Sri Lanka could do the same with wind power. They have the natural conditions. We all have solar energy. We're blessed with the sun. Maybe sometimes too much, we feel. But so frankly, for me, energy is a huge opportunity, which if, again, we think beyond boundaries, we would manage to do something about it. We need to reinvigorate our sub-regional institutions, SAARC, BIMSTEC, etc. And I don't believe that any one country should have a veto to prevent others from cooperating among themselves. And I think, given our present situation, the time has come to start changing the way we think of this. As for how we engage the world, we have a whole host of new possibilities. Over the last decade, there's a huge South Asian diaspora across the world, which is gaining influence and power in the countries that they've gone to. And that can not only help our own development, but change our image and actually create new opportunities for all of us. Their role in enabling policy, in contributing economically to our own development. Look at the role that remittances play in all our economies now. And that, I think, is proof of how important this diaspora is, and we're not using it as South Asia to the potential that we could be using it. So we need to channelize that. We also, frankly, need to take responsibility for our own politics. And we should see security and stability as a common goal, jointly arrived at. We have good examples of practical cooperation in the subcontinent itself on maritime security, on counterterrorism, and in other areas. Since 2010, we've had maritime security between, say, India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, which we're expanding in the Indian Ocean region. We're hoping to see the same thing in the Bay of Bengal with Bangladesh, Myanmar, and the others. What India and Bangladesh together have done in counterterrorism and in handling insurgent groups, frankly, laid the basis for the transformation in the connectivity in the economic relationship over the last 15 years. And we need to do this across the region, between all those who can. And we should stop saying that politics, security is too sensitive, let's come to it later, we'll do the economics. You can't do that anymore. As I said, in the kind of world we're in today, you can't separate the politics from the economics or the economics from the politics. In fact, the opposite has happened. Politics is in command, so deal with it. And we have to handle the politics right among ourselves. I think domestic politics based on arousing fear of neighbors only leads to a dead end. And until the citizens make it clear to political masters that we have no space for zero-sum political games, that we have to think bigger, think beyond boundaries, I think we will not be able to realize our potential. So let me conclude by saying what I'm trying to say is basically that a crisis is only useful if it leads to change, if it jolts us out of our old habits of thinking, out of our bad habits of practice, and leads us into doing something new and different. That happened in India in 1991 when we faced a balance of payments crisis, and it jolted us into actually dismantling the license permit Raj and into opening the economy, and we got into the high growth years of the Indian economy. The present crisis that many of us in South Asia face and that we face as a whole, therefore, seems to me an opportunity that we need to seize. What I mentioned is, I think, only the thin end of the wedge. And if we think creatively about what we can do, I'm sure that we as South Asia will do much better than we have even in the last few decades. Thank you very much for listening to me so patiently.
Thank you, Professor Menon, for your keynote. Indeed, it's time that we now start looking for opportunities in obstacles and possibilities in problems. Before I invite our other keynote, our gratitudes toward our chief guest, Right Honorable Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba, for his gracious presence and participation in Kantipur Conclave 2022. We understand that he has commitments he needs to attend to, and so we thank him for being with us today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here at Kantipur Conclave 2022. Once again, a big welcome to all our distinguished guests, delegates who have joined us in this two-day conference. I'd also like to inform all our distinguished guests that we are live on Kantipur Television HD, Kantipur Cineplex HD, and eKantipur. Again, a reminder, in the sessions that will follow, you will be able to ask your questions through the app Events More. So if you haven't already downloaded the app, a humble request to do so, and you can put forward your question and interact with the panelists and our moderators through the app. I would now like to invite our other keynote speaker on stage, Mr. Bhoj Pokharel, former Chief Election Commissioner, Nepal. Mr. Bhoj Pokharel played a crucial role in integrating the Maoist rebels into democratic electoral processes and was one of the key architects of making Nepal's elected bodies more inclusive and representative. He has also served as the UN Secretary General's high-level panel to Bangladesh during the 2008 elections and Southern Sudan's referenda process. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome with a big round of applause Mr. Bhoj Pokharel.
Namaste. I didn't see Mr. Kailash Sirohiya, but he has gone to see off to Prime Minister. Mr. Sirohiya, Right Honorable Prime Minister, he has already left the place. Professor Shivshankar Menon, Excellencies, sisters and brothers. Let me start by thanking Kantipur Publications for giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts in this conclave. The planned sessions for today and tomorrow are, I see, very much important in terms of national, regional, and the international perspective. Many of the issues that I am going to touch upon are related to several thematic discussions for today and tomorrow. I stand here to share some of my experiences, especially in democratic governance and elections, and I will be much more focusing on the national level. I would like to begin with a personal story. I was born and raised in a far east remote village. I had to walk 1 hour uphill for an hour to reach my school. I used to carry from home a straw mat to sit on and a wooden plank to write and study under the open sky. We used to write on the clay-coated wooden plank with twigs from the nearby trees. Now, my 5-year-old grandson, who lives thousands of kilometers away, demonstrates his assignment that he completed by giving verbal commands to the computers without using the keyboards. He even teaches me how to use the latest gadgets and sometimes pulls my leg for not knowing how to use them. This is just an example of the astonishing development and adoption of technology across the globe. Mobile phones, internet. Actually, the light is so much opposite and anyway, mobile phones, internet, and social media have become so ubiquitous that it is beyond belief to someone like me who was born in a remote village after the Second World War. The pace of advancement in technology has made the world smaller. It has practically dissolved the borders between the countries. The world today is connected in a true sense. Now, many issues are not limited to one country or a region. The impact of an incident in one corner of the globe can be felt throughout the world in a moment. Technology has made life comfortable and doing tasks easier. It has made goods and services easily available to a wider population, including those in remote parts of the world. And those goods and services are relatively cheap, thus affordable to the masses. However, misuse of technology poses serious risks and challenges to society. How can everyone take fair advantage of the opportunities provided by technology? How can we humanize technology? How to deal with the misuse of technology in criminal and terrorist activities, misinformation, cyber war, and similar harmful activities. It has now become imperative for us to prepare ourselves for these challenges, both at national and international level. Furthermore, technological advances and globalization sometimes have unintended consequences. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has shown how vulnerable the world is, how a disease can spread from one corner of the world to the rest of the world, and how the incident or accident in one corner of the world can disrupt the entire global supply system mechanism. Within this global context, I would like to shift to my talk closer to our home. Our country, Nepal, has a unique identity in the world due to its geographic and climatic variations, abundant natural resources, rich biodiversity, ethnicity, and culture. But unfortunately, we cannot say with any conviction that Nepal and Nepalese are prosperous and have a bright future ahead. I am sorry to say it. I would like to present a few examples here. One, Nepal has almost unlimited water resources, which Professor Menon also indicated, that which can be used to meet different needs within and outside the country, in particular, drinking water, food security, and clean, sustainable electricity. By harnessing our hydropower, we can not only fulfill our energy needs, but We can also support the needs of other countries in the region, but our water is flowing and is going to waste while we are busy chanting pseudo-nationalistic slogans and are locked in indecision either due to political or personal interest, putting the nation at a loss. Two, as I mentioned earlier, and which is common knowledge that all Nepalese, our country is bestowed with rich biodiversity, spectacular scenic landscapes, and ancient cultures. The country has huge potential in many dimensions in tourism, ranging from mountaineering, hiking, pilgrimage, research, and medical tourism. Have we successfully harnessed these possibilities to their fullest extent in a sustainable manner? That's the question. We lie between two of the rapidly expanding major markets in the world, China and India. Until yesterday, we used to say that our country is an unfortunate yam stuck between two massive boulders and considered it as our limitations. But now, it is like a gold mine of possibilities. Strategic use of this geographic advantage has great potential for the development of Nepal, Nepalese, and the whole region. 4, currently 75% of our population is under 40 years of age. This is a good sign for the country's healthy future. However, we know that a large number of working age youth aim to migrate to foreign countries for employment due to the lack of opportunities in the country. They migrate for employment of all kinds, ranging from manual labor to high-tech and intellectual fields such as medical, engineering, and so and so. Current estimates put youth migration at more than 500,000 annually. They believe that due to prevailing governance, political, and economic conditions, there is no future in this country, and they are thus migrating in mass for their future. This is a sad example of brain and muscle drain. These are just a few examples of the potentials as well as the current challenges of the country. Why we could not utilize our natural and man-made resources for the improvement of the lives of our population? Are our aspirations for a bright future too ambitious or unrealistic? I am sure all agree that is not the case. In the last 3 decades, the country has made a big leap in physical terms. There is no doubt about the per capita income has increased, the standard of living of common citizens has risen, indexes related to education, health have been increasing at decent and encouraging rates. However, despite all these potentials and the achievements, the general feeling among the population is that of despair, frustration, lament of bleak future for their children, and overall angers toward the way the country is being governed. In my humble opinion, it all boils down to the issue of global politics, and good governance. Lack of those elements restrict the pathway to development. I will try to elaborate on these in a minute. I firmly believe that a sound political system with long-term vision about the development of the country and a solid framework of governance, rule of law, functioning institutions are the prerequisites for multi-dimensional and inclusive development of any country. By multi-dimensional, I mean sustainable development that balances economic, environmental, social, and cultural aspects. Shortly after the restoration of democracy in the late 80s, we were caught caught in a cycle of constant political instability. Parliaments were dissolved many times in a short period of time. We experienced the decade-long armed conflict, the regressive authoritarian role, then decisive people's movement of 2006 that led to the Republic. We created a constitution written by the people for themselves with the promise of not allowing the repetition of all the shortcomings experienced by the previous government. We also made provisions in the constitution to prevent the reoccurrence of such instabilities. We are confident that with a constitution written by the people for the people with sound democratic values in it, peace and political stability would prevail in the country and we would embark on the journey of prosperity. We believe that we would not have to revert to the street agitations for another big political change as we had witnessed almost every decade. The question comes, where and how did we go wrong, even after having a solid moral constitution and largely fair election? Democracy thrives in efficiency, capacity, effectiveness, and credibility and competence of the main pillars of democracy, including the parliament, judiciary, constitutional bodies, political parties, civil societies, and the media. Only through their strong role in positive and effective check and balance can democracy flourish. However, knowingly or unknowingly, we can and paralyze these institutions. Many countries around the world have shown that where there is a strong system, institution, process, methods established, and the people have faith in them, it can endure occasional shocks to their political systems. One of the essential pillars of the democracy is periodic and fair election. Since the transformative change of the mid-80s in the political landscape, we have successfully conducted several elections of different level of government in this country. We should be proud about the democratic process as well as the practice of nonviolent transfer of power. This is something that is not commonly seen in many countries with similar situations as ours. But election alone is not sufficient to guarantee democracy. In the past 3 decades, extreme politicization and uncontrolled party interference have been a greater misfortune for this country. We should determine the limits of party control over the state or the government. The de facto supremacy of political parties was introduced as a tool for managing conflict. Continuity of this transitional problem-solving approach, a so-called Sarvodaliya Sahamati or all-party agreement approach, as the governing model is weakening formal institutions. People's basic desire have been undermined by the culture of rule of compromises, where the interest of 2 or more competing political parties come together with little concern for the interest of the people. When the public trusts the governance system and those who run them, they feel assured of their future and that of their children. It is obviously why youths are leaving the country in droves. In that respect, what should the country focus on to move forward? In my opinion, the following 5 elements should be our key priorities. First, hope. It should be about how to regenerate hope and instill faith in the public that the country, system, and leadership would address their problems and concerns. Second, trust. Citizens' trust in established institutions, system, and processes is another condition for democratic governance. Third, democratic culture. a culture of encouraging and constructive criticism and being responsive to such criticism with full sincerity. Intellectual discourses on systematic deformities and informing the public about their remedies will strengthen democracy. Fourth, integrity. This is the core value of governance. It generates trust and hope in the citizens, and lack of it creates corruption, despair, and destruction. Impunity has become the constant feature of the state. Lack of credibility is perhaps the key challenge we are facing today. There is a huge gap between what we say and what we do. There is no consistency in our words and behaviors. Let us be consistent in our words and actions. Let us translate our commitments into actions. Fifth, strong institutions. Let us focus our strength in building institutions that are vital for a functional democracy in the true sense. Recently, Boris Johnson stepped down as the UK Prime Minister because he was found crossing the limits set by his own administration to contain COVID-19. But in Nepal, those who organized large gatherings flouting COVID rules were instead feted. When are you going to raise these questions of accountability and morality? Dozens of heads of states or government that I have worked with have engaged themselves from politics once they were out of power. They say one should not interfere after one is out of power. In our case, we see trend of once a leader, always a leader. I think this is another reason why our politics is going downhill. Our experience shows that we have many politicians, but hardly any visionary leader who could rise above their personal or party interest or above the self. There is one saying, a politician is only concerned about the next election, a leader about the next generation. We are looking for that leader. It is true that elections have faced serious credibility questions globally. We are not its exceptions. As a student of election, I have a few dreams which I think are very important and are not difficult to achieve if we are sincere. My dreams include having a fixed election date ensured by law. Party candidates are selected on primary basis. Voters cast their vote with an informed choice without any type of intimidation or personal gains. No need for bullets to secure the ballots. Election management is fully decentralized and election is less costly. Voters should be allowed to vote from any corner of the world with appropriate technology. I wish I could see them in my lifetime. Despite the grim pictures of the country I painted above, we see light at the end of the tunnel. A group of vibrant youths had jumped into the political process and public affairs to detoxify the systemic mess from within. Our democratic future depends on how we provide space for this group of young people in our political processes. As I said earlier, 3/4 of Nepal's current population is under 40 years of age. In contrast, we observe that only a few from this generation are in the decision-making levels in political parties and the government. Hopefully, those in power will pay urgent attention not to just incorporate the priorities of the younger generation, but also to bring them in decision-making positions as quickly as possible. They should have a decisive voice in their own destiny. It is my firm belief that to perform these tasks that make people experience rule of law, we don't have to search for additional resources and additional resources. We don't need to call to any donors. The resources and capacity that we possess are sufficient for it. The only thing that we need is the commitment of the leadership. At this hour, when we are close to the new round of elections, everybody should commit to participate in the elections by voting for qualified leaders, hopefully of the younger generation, with conviction, those who promise not to waste the next 5 years the way we have been doing business in the past. Let us make our target that is to generate hope, hope, and hope. In this age of globalization and connectivity, we have reached a state of world beyond borders. We have many resources and potentials to improve our country, its governance, and the lives of current and future generations. With proper leadership, good governance, and solemn commitment and true patriotism among the political leaders, bureaucrats, intellectuals, media, and the general public, we can achieve progress which may seem beyond expectations. Let us strive for that. I wish the organizers success in addressing the issues on the table. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. बत्ती चाहिँ मिलाउनै पर्ने रहेछ है पछिलाई धेरै गाह्रो पर्यो थ्याङ्क यू
Thank you very much, Mr. Pokharel, for beautifully elaborating on the various aspects of how we can progress with hope, with trust, with democratic culture, with integrity, and with strong institutions. Once again, gratitude towards Mr. Pokharel for your intriguing keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come towards the end of the opening session here at Kantipur Conclave 2022, Beyond Boundaries and Beyond Expectations. We would now like to take a short 10 minutes break. So we'd like to request all of you to kindly join us for tea and coffee outside the hall. And please be back in the next 10 minutes as we will set the stage for the very first session, Tackling the Climate Crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, see you in 10.